Hello to everybody. Usually when people introduce people, they print the night before their biography and they read Francesca Torzo has won many international prizes she's been published on. They read a personal and professional biography. I would not do that because if you go on an internet site, you can see all these things. But I would like just briefly to tell you why her work interests me. Of course, she's a person with a very articulated, sometimes even novel-like biography, but that's not my business in a way, because I think we should look at the work of people, not at the biography. Modernism trying to shift from the work to the person. Sometimes modern artists have to show off themselves. Salvatore Dali went around Paris with a delicious anteater, formichiere, and so on. So this idea of showing the person, and many times the media do that. The media insist of asking people, you know, what kind of underwear, where you go on vacation, what is your think about life, what is your favorite color. I will not do that. I will try to tell you why her work interests me very much. And to do that, I will try to put it this way. In my own, let's say, development, intellectual development in architecture, I found some polarities between two ways to interpret things or to thematize things, which ended up in sort of contradictions, which means you had people working mostly on one of the terms to the extreme and the other one. I'll make you an example. There's conflicts like when you do residential design between what you could call domesticity or comfort and a certain architectural dimension intended as what Winkelmann used to say, the noble simplicity, something which has to do with the value of the building itself. And in small scale, and some super architects, they tend to solve, to me, the contradiction. You see some works where these two poles are not enemies, but somehow they do a yin-yang melt. Just to make an example, this conflict, I remember Herzberger saying that the Rotonda by Palladio was not a house, it was somehow a temple. Then he had a very interesting interpretation, but I will not tell you now. But when you see Villa Snellman by Asplund, Gunnar Asplund, a Swedish architect, in a way, you would buy it. I would buy it as my country home, but also has a set of very sophisticated architectural values, the placement of windows, that you cannot lead back to pure comfort. You know, it's like a chair or a sofa can be very comfortable. And these sort of American chairs where you touch a button and they lean down. I'd rather have a comfortable chair than a beautiful chair. But then somehow some chairs give you a posture. You know, I have in my house the Catilina chair by Cacciadomignoni, and when you sit there, you feel like a Roman senator. Then another contradiction I had, for example, is between a certain level of abstraction. The architectural object conceived in space like a geometrical entity, something in axonometrics, you could say that axonometrics is the view of God because he's nowhere in no special place. He's everywhere, nowhere, so he has no single point of view. And all the themes of construction, materiality. Some project, they feel overly, they want to belong to the realm of ideas. Some, one could say, Boulez, Etienne Louis Boulez, the Cenotafio di Newton, against Ridolfi and designing every little single brick. And this contradiction to me was not solved, but an example that was the Fisher House by Louis Kahn. It's very abstract in its volumes, but then when you go to the window seat, it's amazing how, you know, this. And you know, and you could go on. I think some projects by Juan Navarro Baldeweg solved to me the dilemma between history and artistry. Okay, so then I tell you another anecdote. Many years ago, I taught in a seminar in Naples, and it was a funny situation where you had 6 or 7 students and almost the same number of teachers. We had group of teachers. By chance, I was in a group of teachers with Enric Miralles. You know, Miralles is a famous Catalan architect. Marino Narpozzi, he was a pupil of Aldo Rossi, and Christoph Mackler, he was a German, very sachlich architect. The theme of the seminar was redesigning the market square in Naples. The market square in Naples has a 1700 trace, but no really historical buildings. And then the students went to ask to Marino Narpozzi, what should we do, professor? And he said, you should go to the bibliothèque and study the typology of 1700 market square. Then they went to Christoph Mackler, and he said, by tonight, you should have ready a cardboard model in A3 format. The grams of the paper should be 170 grams like this, you know, this. And then they went to Miralles and said, Professor Miralles, what should we do? And he said, you should close your eyes and go to the market square and smell the piece of the cats and the rats. And then they came to Cino Zucchi and said, Professor Zucchi, what should we do? I didn't know whether to try to put together these 3 totally different things or to say my things. In the end, Narpozzi, in an ideal theatrical way, represented the typological historicist approach. You know, maybe not as brilliant as Aldo Rossi, which is a very complex figure. Christoph Mackler represented something about craftsmanship, doing things well, you know, something like, you know, constructive, some kind of procedural way. And of course, Enric Miralles represented the sort of the empathic stream of consciousness way. Each of these people, they had their own work, and they can take what you could call, I don't want to call it a method, a way of doing, and generate a final work that you could judge for the good, for the less. But it was strange how it was almost impossible to put these 3 things together for the students. So we had a lot of fun, but the students were totally in production. When you leave this contradiction, sometimes you have people coming from the sky, they arrive from another planet. There is a film which is called A Velvet Goldmine, where something comes from, maybe David Bowie, there was a film, L'uomo che cadde sulla terra, the man who fell on earth. So, you know, among all this, Francesca Torzo, the woman who fell on earth, came like Mary Poppins with an umbrella and solved all these problems. In a way, I'm talking about her work. She embodies everything I always thought an architect should be, and try to explain to people in debates, in negotiation. You are in the city, you have the people defending, you know, structures, people, politicians there, and you try to make them understand what you can do and you cannot do with architecture. That's another good question. And you seem you're not able really to clarify your role. It's also, of course, a social role. So I would say that what you could call, I don't want to call it history, but the awareness of precedent, of that. There's a song by Leonard Cohen that says, many loved before us, I know we are not new. In city and in forest, they smile like me and you. Every time you say a love world, thousands of people said not exactly the same one. So we have to be aware that the problems we are dealing with has been dealt over and over again in the history of architecture. To call that as a history, it means that we formalize that in history books. I would call it precedent rather than history, because history is already the elaboration. When we are tourists, we go In cities, we do some traveling. Europe is a wonderful place to learn from because you move 100 kilometers and you see things. Okay, so this handling of, should we call it collective or individual memories or way of doing? That's another big question we can talk after Francesca lecture. What we see in cathedrals, in buildings, is it the sum of single biographies, or is some kind of cloud of collective things? Maybe in different moments in history, this individual collective balance has been different, you know, between Romanticism and the construction of cathedrals. So I think in Francesca's work, you can see the way she handles and interprets what we could consider the experience of others built in stone. The second thing would be how she can interpret and filters stimuli which are non-architectural. You know, there was a big debate on the San Rocco magazine about the word concept, accusing the word concept, I think rightfully so, to be something which is extraneous of the discipline. So you take inspiration from flowers, clouds, your grandmother, whatever, but some people seem to be able to refer and take inspiration for the whole experience of the world, even sensatory sense experiences, even smells of views. And the question is how these are relevant to your work, because we all sense the work, we all eat, we all smell flowers, but how can you use that in your work? And the third thing, one could say, this craftsmanship, you know, the issue, yesterday I was debating in my studio about the lecture of today, and I started in a way getting aggressive a bit and shouting, said, whenever we solve a technical problem, you show me a detail taken from AutoCAD, whether you do it or you took it from internet, you seem to treat the technical detail only as a matter. I said, the work of Francesca Torzo shows that when she does a detail, is both problem solving. She thinks about things get together. Franco Purini used to say, architecture is a temporary society of materials. It's like woods, stone, plaster getting together and be alive for a moment to hold up a building. In a way, you could say that, you know, they renounce to their original state and they collaborate, like in Witness, the erection of the house, you have this thing taken together. So, but also it embodies ways of doing. I'll make the last example and one more quotation in the later talk. When I was in Milano, I was taught that when you do a brick wall and you put the plaster between a brick and a brick, the water on the outside tend to go and by capillarity go through the plaster and get the inside cavity wet. So it was a very good practice at my time to replaster the whole inside of a brick wall to make a layer of malta, of mortar. Sorry, mortar, not plaster. So the water which would go in by capillarity would stop, will not get it wet. So that for me was the truth, the good truth. When I went to work in Venice and I asked to a bricklayer, why don't you plaster the inside? I say, what, plaster mortar the inside? Never, ever, ever. But say, why? You know, because in Venice, you know, you have acqua alta, the water coming up, and the problem is not that, is to let the cavity dry when water comes out from the back. So what was considered a good practice in Milano, 200 kilometers from there was the contrary. This is true when we go to Germany, when we go to Brazil. Each of us has building conceptions, technologies. Maybe in Holland, they use the tunnel system because of many reasons. So to me, drawing a detail, it's both an intelligent problem solving, like Leonardo da Vinci, but also dealing with the society of people doing things. To me, Francesca's really embodies this double nature. It's not just solving in your own studio the technical problem. I finished with a fax, because at that time internet did not exist, by Gino Valle. Gino Valle was an old master of Italian architecture, and maybe it was 20 years ago. I was working my studio on Sundays, and I called him up on Sunday and I said, Gino, you're also working on Sunday in the studio? And he said, yes, like me. And then I got from a fax, he sent me a fax, handwritten, and he said, listen to this phrase of Goethe. He said, let me translate it in English. I said in Italian, la materia è sotto gli occhi di tutti, al significato ci arriva qualcuno e la forma è un mistero per i più. To the matter is under the eyes of everybody. To the meaning, somebody will get there, and form is the mystery of form. What is convincing, extremely, Francesca, she will tell us how she works, the process which led to her work. But in the end, when the work is finished and in a way successful, it's a synthesis. You cannot break it up anymore. It's like a chord or a molecular. It's composed by things, but it's there. And the relationship of things are more important than the analytics. What we could call grace, beauty in a way could be achieved by rules. Classical beauty has proportion, but grace is something, it cannot be achieved directly. It's something a bit mysterious. In French, you have the expression je ne sais quoi pas, I don't know what, to express the feeling of a little bit astonishment and things that we cannot completely understand how it's there. Grace has to do a little bit for another concept, which is in Spanish agudeza, or wit. It's not beauty, and it's not irony. It's wit. It has to do with intelligence, but expressed in a very synthetic way. The mystery of the work of Francesca, that it's like somehow, how did you get that? And of course, today she will try to explain it. So Francesca Torzo is a statistical anomaly in the Earth. We can only try to, as scientists, understand how the strange moleculars of his work got together. I bless you, and I will leave my word to Francesca Torzo. Ciao.
Oh, mamma mia. Well, Cino, I don't know if I will be able to really put all the story together after your wonderful introduction. And today it's quite a day. We had last night the terrorist attack in Vienna, just almost 1 week ago in Nice, and we are in this kind of turning upside down of the world. So school is more than ever important. It is the belief, and I think that the students that I don't see the faces, would be nice to see the faces, but the students, your students are fortunate, they are privileged. Cino Zucchi is an exceptional architect, teacher, and human being. And what he is offering you is that he provokes in you an independent thinking which has empathy towards life and empathy towards contradiction. But you are authors of your education. You are the authors of your building up tolerance and empathy. And now we are at the moment where we have to ask ourselves as citizens and human beings, how can we imagine this world in other terms than the ones that we may, out of laziness of habits, know. So today it's a very emotional talk because of the circumstances of the world, and also of all this amazing generation of hope after post-World War, which is fading in the air, and because of the respect and admiration I have for Cino as a person, as an architect, and as a teacher. I will share now my screen. And if you do not see good, Joseph, kindly, can you tell me if you see good? Confirm.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see properly. Thank you.
I feel a little bit in an aquarium without seeing any face, being alone. Okay. The talk of today, Late Morning Tales, starts from your assignment. Every time at school we are doing exercises and you are assigned a complex task of grafting a piece of city because you have a vast program in a normal and unique part of the city of Milan, where city is just what survives every time we get to work in places which are never a tabula rasa. So how to deal with what is there and what is not there yet. And the cover of the talk of today is a fragment of a small drawing I made for a publication I'm working on with Timos, together with Alberto Calderone and Philippe Christo, that is for to come, where I was trying to draw the space in between things. Why? Because I believe that there is not real difference between buildings, objects, landscapes, furniture. In a way, they all compose the scenography of our daily life. And this scenography is a kind of cultural theater play which changes through centuries, through the subsiding of the sequencing of temporary cultural agreements of society that are invested of trust, and then they fail and they change. And that has been going on and on, but culture is a slow phenomenon. Therefore, there is much more, as Cino said, of what preceded us all around than our newest inventions of the last decades. How does it work? This wish or question, it's more a question of weaving a dialogue of continuity with past cultures, which is beyond language and beyond technical means, which are of course non-replicable in time as society changes, and so tools of production and even material down-to-earth availability. This style of continuity is based on the basic observation that length of humanity life is long, far longer than the life of a human being. So there's nothing to oppose to that. And what I observe then is that the mind of human being has a sort of hungriness. So we collect all the time fragments of observation through senses. They're like a tool, a device to collect cultural informations, which then are complex, articulated, but never abstract, really. And we hold them in the back of our mind, and we recompose them then in a whole, continuously. There was Sullivan in kindergarten chat saying that the mind of people is a facet agency of the universe. Therefore, we continuously seek for a whole, even if we sense and live out of fragments. I perceive, I observe that there is none parametric rule, holy grail. There is not a form rule or holy grail. Things exist out of relations with each other. Therefore, the minuscule may be the immense, as light may be shadow, as a kind of lumen opacatum. Everything lives together, but then it is our mind recomposing meaning. And in that meaning, it's not only a perception of scale, which drives a sensation, which is cultural and not sentimental, neither romantic, of being small in a vast nave of a church or being vast on a tiny bench on a field. There is also a recognition of belonging to a culture. Therefore, ornament is a festivity of an agreement, of a vision, and we live of visions of how we can live together. It is a civic bet or a civic trust that today more than ever has meaning. These relations that multiply at different scales beyond geographical context always express this kind of culture, and we discover that we have always been travelers, therefore all the world is a melange. That's why it's so meaningful, the teaching you receive from Cino Zucchi, because he's able to collect the songs of the world and listen to them openly. Being open-minded requires kind of humbleness. Our profession is about humbleness. It is surrendering to what we may do not understand because there is paradox, but still build it up in a hope to weave an harmonious dialogue. And harmony, therefore, is tolerance for me. We could name Voltaire, we could call also Vitruvius. Harmony of the parts together. All these, where we have been walking through, and we still are collage I make of photos I just are snapshots of places I visit. What is real? Real is what we perceive with our mind, but then we do need to negotiate with others. Otherwise, our consistency as individuals is nothing. So I am just a technician of spaces. My job is to make buildings, to build chairs, to build tables. And the promenade we're going to have today, it's very dense and it is melanging all different kinds of works, let's say by title, furniture, museum or art gallery, tiny house, but the interest beneath is equal. And the attempt to seek for an authentic dialogue, which is alive, meaning it has a renewed meaning today, is equal as well. I was invited by a Belgium gallery to propose a series of furniture. It's named Maniera, and they produce promote limited editions. I started thinking of a sofa, and the starting point was to seek for comfort, because sofas are hardly comfortable. But at the same time, I wished it to be a cultural landscape. So recalling all this storytelling of these Englishmen traveling the north of Africa, where the divan was the scene for the most relevant business talks, significant key marriages or exchanging camels for spices and so on. But it is an imaginary which arrives through painting. So there is a reformulation through individual beings, but we all can share, even if we're not these Englishmen traveling, this sense of luxury. It is a set of pillows hanging from a very rational, jointless, joined but screwless construction of wood, which is taking direct reference to the joints of the forcole in Venetian wooden boats. So the seat of wood is cut and plugged in, and then you hang pillows so you may clean them without becoming insane or devastating your hands. It was a long search for the measures, and there it's always helping the Eutigrammi and Circini, so the squares and the compasses. And compass in Latin is constellation. So I often work with open lines and compasses so that possible relations among the parts may stay loose, as I do not believe in a top-down form decision, but in a seek for balance which is alive. It was meant to be a luxury living landscape in silk velvet. Silk has a structure, it is a hard fiber, so it stays oriented. Therefore, if you pass your hand, you may draw. But it's also highly vivid in revealing the passing shadow of a woman or the rapid flow of a cloud. It was in tunes of in dark bluish or in all tones of white. It is a sofa, but it is, for me, more important, a scene for life, where you dispose a kiss on a soft landscape of pillows, where you may stay on your own in reading a book upside down while sipping a glass of wine. Or you can also place all around books or shelves that you found. Furniture are living beings, and they represent us, alike houses represent us. We are in Sorano, which is a medieval structure-born village in Tuscany, but the very south part of Tuscany, where it lambisce, almost touches Lazio. So the tufa has not the golden color of the south, but it is misty of green. And that's because we are next to Lazio. They carved the tufa rock in the early 900, 1000, and they cut blocks and they just built on top. So people through centuries being highly economical, they didn't want to waste time, so economy in its best meaning, maximum result with the minimum effort of means. So cut, extract the block and put it up. And there was a topography. So all this movement of houses just follows the most logical topographic asset line. Vitruvius starts, choose well where you build on. I made this tiny house, if you see my arrow, in the corner. It insists on the historical walls of the city. You can see it in the plan. The Tufa hill is surrounded by river Lente, and then open up all the hills on the sides. It's Maremma, a kind of wild part of Tuscany. The house is extremely tiny, 75 square meters, where basically half of it was already carved in the rock. It stays on the walls. That was important to me because I believe that when you approach a context, as there is never a tabula rasa, first thing to me is try to read the cultural structure of a place. So I call it a kind of morphological expression or expressive morphology. So what is the character that resisted? What survived? What did people, even turning and twisting upside down all social agreements and political agreements, preserve? What did they do not find worth to erase? So walls survive. And in the center, you see the historical walls of Viterbo very nearby, and they are with tufa chips in a 6-meter wall, all with dust and rubbish of earth. And it is noble, it is nearby. On the left and right, you see Sorano. So buildings are literally growing on the edge of the cliff. I was on the historical walls, and it was literally a house for chicken that was completely demolished. And I wished to be as well a construction, very tiny, but with the dignity of the historical walls, to do not be bold, arrogant, to be silent. So how do you do that? I had material to tune with the context why denying it. I wish to be a dry construction, very little of mortar, but we're living today, so culturally is another proposition. In fact, the interior is just a kind of balcony overlooking the cliff and the valleys. There are key elements. Those are the metal corner elements that I call the Indians, and those are part of the key structure because it's an experimental construction of dry stone. The principle, each corner has a metal pillar with lamellas which have a kind of hook which is grafting the stone without puncturing it, so just putting the hand, it's filling with the tufa blocks and the insertion of the frames of the windows and thresholds and doors. Then there is the lacunar ceiling of metal, which is stabilizing as it is a seismic area, recessed, sunk in the wall structure, the wood, so it could have the same subtle frame aside. Each room is chained, therefore you have all this system of aligned joint on one side and non-aligned joint on the other side that goes swinging from room to room. So there is a vibration towards a cliff. Sum up the corner pieces, lacunar ceiling, the tufa blocks, double face wall, and then the building site. So things are always very normal in this practice. It is always a work that you do with people, and it's always a point of loyalty for me important, where you try to do not betray the wish, where you have kind of shaken hands with unknown people, a place or workers, and then to build up together a kind of understanding, mutual understanding, where you negotiate habits and laziness. So there was a panic with all these myriads of tufa hills. There was laying beyond the rules and laws of security and on building, but people had pride. It is, as you see, a context of wildness in Tuscany. It's not the Crete of Siena. There's something strong, not really sweet, inside. It is about being an indoor, which is enhanced by the faraway hills, which dispose a kind of curtain of green, because when you stand, you never see the sky. The windows are pretty low. Only when you sit, you gain a view to the clouds or the sun. That curtain, filigree of woods and trees, which is changing through seasons, gives more privacy to the interior of this balcony, where the rooms are 5 by 6 to by 120, 120 by 120. The interior finishing is just a brushed lime, so that it may soften the construction of the tufa blocks that go changing from one wall to the other. It is a sequencing of rooms. You may call it a kind of, recognize an enfilade, but when you are inside, you mostly live outdoor. So does a size, a parameter, 75 centimeter by 50 define your relation to a landscape or another space? No, it is what the space beside, next to it, that allows you to define the scale. Same goes with movement of bodies and dresses. We live of movement of the body and movement of the mind. This amazing photograph of Margaret Maret from the 30s is of a man. It is a man in kimono. And that for me was the starting point when I was asked by Maniera to do something with this texture of the rumble diamond facade of Z33, the house for art. And I said, okay, let's emancipate and do a dress. It meant measuring my body and then drawing for the first time a dress scale 1 to 20, seeking for the point of fold or accents of the body, invisible one, cutting a line, bed linen from my grandmother, making a prototype, going to a professional to get thought that you need a tiny pence on the side in order to have, like on this photo, second line left, that it caresses the breast of the woman, but the pence is secret. But then how do you bring harmony in the decoration, which means representation? Animals as buildings, as people, celebrate their character. Fishes, birds, there are different logics, but there is a festivity and there is a culture. Birds have a logic of fan with horizons of lines, with a kind of equaliness per families of feathers, probably related also to need of function, flight function. Fishes have a different task, those squame, those individual elements. So the element is the same, but they admit resizing it and shifting the placement of it. So there is not a radial, but they continuously shift their positioning point in order to achieve a continuity of mantle. In order to arrange harmoniously in the different parts of the kimono, the drawing of rumbles, we learned both from fishes and birds. So you see, it starts as a kind of opus reticulatum, it opens as a peacock and becomes a fan. Here, top corner, left, you see the fish logic. So to tune the balance between background and the singular elements, we had to invite exception. And that is what is important to me. We need disciplines in our profession, but if a discipline doesn't work, it's stupid. It's like you have a screwdriver which has a wrong point to open a screw. You don't use a star to open a cut screw. So you have to change the tool. Here we have the front. Here the goal was continuous. We made up inkjet print on crêpe de Chine with finissage, and that's it. So it is always about a behavior. A behavior that has always, I think, a time. I don't believe really in timeless. I think everything has a time, but everything which is precisely possible and real in a time may host, hold, and rephrase other stories. We are in Belgium now, Hasselt, capital of Limburg, and it has a very key strategic position in Europe because in 1 hour you are in Paris, in Germany, in Amsterdam, but it is a 70,000 village, let's say. It has a print, a kind of a clear urban structure from middle time where you see the ring of water around the urban fabric. And the urban fabric is meander-like. So it speaks of water. That's something also that tells us how slow is the life of people. In every place you can see if it speaks about clashes of earth plates or if it is a misty sand, water, meander, alluvional context where people have built with a sense of economy and common sense, and it stays. So what did it produce? It produced a very dense structure where there are a lot of secret passage, shortcuts in the city that reopen and invent spaces, but it also has a major island within the city, a city within the city, which you see here on the right, which is the Beguinage, which is a typology typical of the North, Belgium and Holland, which was a city of women at the border of society because they were orphaned, they were raped, they were crazy, but they were very intelligent and they had the right to live in exchange of services. So there were teachers dying and so on. In the center, there was mostly a church surrounded by orchards and gardens. So you walk in the city and everywhere you just keep on encountering over and over this walk in the street, then a passage with a glimpse of shadow reopening towards a garden or another courtyard or another in between the buildings. And so what we started doing was to measure each stone of the context of the Beguinage in and out. What is the sense of this measuring each stone? We're not like fetishist collectors, but it was important to learn, to learn this cultural permanency where even a block of stone speaks. And then we started tracing fragments of our outdoor spaces as a sidewalk along a street, a courtyard, a open space which would suggest a movement or a standing of people. We even drew a street, even if we had no commission at all, trying to see the natural light and shadow, the artificial light and shadow, the trees. So to live always with a broader context. And at the same time, we're tracing with pencil literally a calque of the existing building because the competition was the extension of an existing museum from 1958. And tracing, seeking for the right size of our brick because we want to make a brick building. And is it that schematic? Is it just about taking a meter and getting imposed millimeters by something which is there? No, it is that there is a secret, it is an unspoken but present and real rhythm, grain, consistency. I call it a kind of sound ground of cities, a music. And it was until the 70s that this variation of bas-relief was existing. And I go back. This subtle, down-to-earth competence of representation was also present in Missa, which was then poor man, badly sold as less is more, which is just silly because he's so representative and so acculturated and civic in his classicism. And it's not a casualty that his best friend was Rudolf Schwarz. Totally different language, but they shared an ethic and a culture, a classical culture, which has plurality and differences in it. So representation where you use size parameter of one thing to give respect to something which is there without mocking him in form of a copy. We tried and tuned the color of the mortar, lighter, darker, what does it happen? And then we printed a 6-meter textile for the competition presentation because we wished people to live it. And how do people live things? They need to live them as real. Doesn't need to be a footnote of veridicity, of realism. Realism is fake. Veridicity can make people live stories. That's why we go to films. theater, and songs. It was from the competition of project of rooms where I wished it to be living with blackout. So shadow matters as much as light, and we were lucky that it sorted out good. I was very unsecure about that. And it's very relevant to me, the central drawing, because it may look very silly or laconic to you, but for me it's clear structure where the dark corners are the outdoor facade, while the light corners are the indoor. So it's as what was key and crucial to me, that everything would have been a sequencing of spaces within and without, outdoor and indoor, and what is each one specific, but not two realms, just differences entwining together in real experience and perception. So what we did, we wanted to just support, confirm the posture, the cultural structure of the existing building, where the Béguinage houses are from the 18th century. Then we have a gin factory from the 19th century, houses for the elderly from the 50s, existing museum 1958, and the extension building. Just we thought it was important to confirm the consistency of the Béguinage through a brick building where there's not big difference between the attitude of the interior and exterior, so city and building, as it is an ensemble of rooms. Very simple. We walk around, so we confirm the continuity of the built border of bricks to protect the integrity of the big garden. And all the rooms inside, we just phrase them in a way that you could name them by their name, like it's a big room, grand chambre, it's a small room, petit chambre. It is a tower, grote toren, it is a small tower, petit toren. It is a path, the alley. It is a loggia, it is a gallery, because that's how we speak. Outside, therefore, it is very abstract facade in a way, 60 meters, jointless, apart one, and blind with no glass, so absorbing the light, where you may see just leaves, but it's really not different from what is happening there since at least 4 centuries. Introvert, blind towards the street, and it reopens all buildings in a filigree of windows towards interior. But is that something only about facade? No, it is an echo of spatial sequencing, and are enfilade only about indoor spaces, or is something that we meet again over and over? It is about associations of the mind. For me, I think this dialogue with past cultures. But when does it work? Does it work if you do the same? What does it mean to do the same? Can you ever do the same? Can you ever drink the same coffee? Can you ever have the same thought? I believe it is impossible. So you do it with your means, with your tools, with your time, with your culture. We had to be sharp, but in order to make it alive to people, we needed to make it real and vibrant in texture, in color, because that variation was the only tool to tune the empathic domesticity of a big building and tune a sound ground of scale with the cultural structure of the place. And you see it in all the details. But there is not a love for the detail on its own. Every detail is meaningless if it doesn't do something about life for people. Outdoor, facade blind, as the other building mostly. Interior as well, the garden, which is bottom, opening in a filigree of windows, but they're never copying a size. So to tune continuity, it's not about just measuring and replying. We tune, on the other side, the two levels of the existing building, the museum, in the other one. But we introduced a secret floor, which is for the staff. Quickly the plans. So on, this is like the joining line of the existing building. Right, you have the existing building from 1958, a very elegant, sober building. On the left, you have the extension building. Very different and very similar. I'm not going to walk through, but basically 2 floors for the public. In the midst, a secret kind of Parisian palace stuff floor, which has access everywhere in a very rational way. We're going to walk around. So when you enter, first place you meet is this. It is 12 meter high and it has a very gentle slope, which is just accompanying naturally the difference of level, which is the street, because we think that the streets are flat, but no, there are meters flying up and down, even when it seems it's like a flat land. So we are there and it is accompanying, echoing the medieval folds of the village. We arrive in a vestibule which is overlooking the public staircases, which are kind of Baroque scene, where I had this crazy gift because what you see on the floor, it seems a light of shadow. Well, a shadow of light that was made happy Breton, but it's just a projection of the top light down on the floor, which I wish to happen, but this match, believe me, was not preconceived and my iPhone fell on the ground when I saw it. You enter the Grote Toren, where you have a lacunar ceiling, which was meant to have a kind of machine of light where the curators may tune natural light, artificial light, because art provokes, awakes, and so you need to have that kind of a tool that switch to tune the surreal or hyperreal or oniric. So become God of the weather elements, night and day, if you need that. For the rest, it's just a turnaround where these interior spaces are all outdoor spaces, painting of light, depending on the weather, the interior spaces, but it's all an invented world. It's a trompe-l'œil because we are not referring to the context that we saw only at the entrance. We keep on being in an interior world, even with the outdoor, circling around and around. And the spaces vary in height, but also in depth. And it is non-different from what people already experience in the city or in the same beguinage, trespassing the thresholds of the courtyards or the church ruins. And this echoing of assonances comes also in the handrails, which homage the existing handrail that we just had to raise for the new laws of security of the existing building from 1958. And it is not about mortifying yourself and being servant of an existing space. It is about living together, continuing or singing together, because it is one building made of 2, extension and renovation. While you're walking among this long depth, you reach the biggest room, which is called Le Lac, and there 19 by 10 meters, you meet again, finally, the context. And there indeed you can rest. We are overlooking the beautiful roofs of the gin factory. And so everything we do, I think we always should consider, like also in your assignment, no? You have one wonderful work by Virginie Pollini next to you, High Rise. you live of these things, but also of the anonymous, maybe parking garage in front of you. We need all that is around, and it is not us. The ceiling, the diamond ceiling, is a tool to calm the perception in a way, to give continuity and to smoothen the exceptionality of the roofs. Thresholds are very tiny. It is 200 millimeter, sometimes 160. We overlook down to the steg, or we keep on walking, alike in the existing building, through a bridge where again we have the top light. There is non-difference. Everything reacts to natural light. And as I told you, it was really such a gift that it worked out. Left and right photographs are taken at 5 minutes distance, as in Belgium the wind flies fast. Everything is alive and reacts to weather elements, but also to our moods. So when we had the building site, the first thing, it's a public tender, so we couldn't choose the builder. We got a very long process to get there. When we got it, was a temporary association. What I did was to print the central images, which were photographs taken of a model 1 to 10 in a theater, in order to have the same quality of the sunlight, so as natural as possible, to be for veridicity, not for realism, and to just tape them on the walls of the office of the builder, so we all could remind the shake hand. Building the concrete walls, we were always checking if we were keeping that promise we made, not only to the client. It's not that tiny, our engagement responsibility. We work for the people that we never will meet, that are not yet born even. And there were a lot of challenges because this building has a budget for social housing. We made a lacunar ceiling, which is load bearing, with beams 1.60 meters high, bottom 4 centimeters, and top 160, which is something that, I mean, last things I know like this are from the 50s. And it's not self-compacting concrete, so it's a masterpiece of building site, but made with normal tools and normal people, small team. You have here Michael and Christoph, which were the building site managers. I asked for 2, but normally you only get 1, because building site manager normally is the manager of the bad moods and the cheaty attitudes of all the subcontractors. I asked for 2 people screwed in place every day because I was terrified for my distance from the building site. And we had a kind of around 100 messages, WhatsApp exchange daily for 365 days. But then a bunch of 5 people making all the road construction. Among this gentle giant with whom I was exchanging Bauhaus letters, a wood carpenter who made all the detail of the frames for the casting, and they said, we want to make the X-ray to finish the precast walls because it has to be finished good, and we don't want to be paid the extra. But then I made a fight that they would be paid the extra. So what you do, you build a kind of shake hand of dignity and common goal, but it has to be very real in a way, and down to earth and pragmatic. It's not about being nice guys. It is about being loyal, honest, and also allow a part of earning, but with a measure. Nothing for me, it's very true what Cino said. I'm not that much interested in details, if not for supporting a narrative. So when I was drawing, searching for the ceiling that was needed to be a very efficient infrastructure for light, fire devices, camera, so technical infrastructure, because the House for Art has no permanent collection. So who knows if it is a Mickey Mouse of 5 millimeters on the floor, or if there is a Godzilla climbing the wall. that they need to enlighten. Then I needed to break the sound because everything is in concrete. And one thing is the ceiling had to be plastered, but that was a cut of budget. So it's only sprayed with lime and it's not optimal as we hoped, the acoustic, but it is helping a little. And I needed to have a dialogue with existing building, which has all the rooms that have an individual ceiling. It's a facade. And what does that do? Our mind registers and keeps in the background that there is a ceiling. And therefore, you just make yourself quiet. Okay, there's a ceiling. And so you build up continuity in your perception. If the ceiling would have been flat, that would have revealed much more the regularity of the rooms because no one of them, apart few exceptions, is squared. Another thing, it had to be tuned in dimension, not only with the literally the electrical supply, but also with an overall measures, even if the brick of the wall, the facade, and the diamond are not directly relating to each other, but men and women are non-stupid, so our brain does register many things we don't know. We started from the one-to-one papier-mâché of the square, looking for the dimension, and the center is literally the 120 of the ERCO plug, where you just plug in the lamp you need. Then we made a try how to tune an efficient geometry where we need to reduce to minimum the exceptions for costs. And we failed. You see, it's a disaster. If we only had exception at the last module, then we would put the volume so high of exception. So let's start with the rule squared. Everything 400 by 400, 70 millimeter from the wall. More complex, 2 lines of exception. So we may tune a fading, so to trick the perception. Nothing invented by us. Pantheon did it, but even Egypt. So just redoing what worked in the past. Here you see the lac, where it is more complex. The rules and the exception to the rules. And then the technical infrastructure, which is the starting point together with the cultural motivation on the other side. So why it was so important, these 7 centimeters? Because it was fundamental to read the line where the wall and the ceiling would meet, so that the ceiling would be a ceiling, because the 7 centimeters then spread in the other flat part. So we do have a ceiling, which is decorated. Ornament. Ornament is culture and needs rigor. The facade, as we saw before, started from seeking for the right grain to tune a cultural dialogue with existing building. And on the other side, like having 2 hands working together, was a device to work with the opening, the thresholds. The thresholds are the key element to establish a relation among the spaces. Down to earth, we had to study the foldings of these bricks because the facade folds. I was mismatched in the words convex and concave to the street and then to the garden, but you see that the joint size width is changing and also the geometry of the central brick is changing. We had to make it feasible, so we started first how to make the diamond shape. If you extrude it, you make explode the machines because extrusion, basically you have a machine pumping, pressing mass of clay, which can be differently mixed, through a mask. So since it is a lot of effort placed there, if you change the mask, all the pressure change, and so we would have bankrupt the company. So no extrusion possible. Then if you do it by hand, you have too much mistake, everything irregular in the range of 10 to 13 millimeters. And then how do you move a rumble? But we had 103 forms. How do you do that? Beside, we were making all a kind of, I don't like to call it color sampling. It is a color survey, a search. To define a color of something, hardly you get it with one color. That's why it's so interesting. And this I share a lot with Cino. We are mad for all those color books because you see it's infinite, the world, and also the way people name the colors. So this kind of mini symphonies of colors, these surveys for each building to try to understand how we could be among these buildings. And then how to make it real to the people who are producing. This was a dinner on the boat of Petersen, the mind and soul behind the Petersen company in Denmark of bricks. And to make it clear, the only way I could explain it was to mix wine, milk, and water, and then we had it. So they literally did that to bring it to the Kim, nicknamed Kim Clay, who's a German master of baking, a chemical shaman. So that you see, number corresponds to mix of clay, and here there is no sand, so it doesn't vitrify. 3 types of clay mixed, but in different percentages. So number change, 63, 68, 24, 23. Then more numbers means different temperature of baking. 1040, 1060, 1080. We are at the end 21, which is 1080 baking temperature, which is clinker, but no sand, so doesn't vitrify. It is softened. It absorbs the light. That was important to be quiet. 60 meters by 12, it's not small, not small. So you can really be shouting too loud in a city. But then a lot of problems. All the edges with irregularity. So producing an insane reading light. And then all the surface. So long process. We did do it in part by hand, in part by machine. A machine plugging a block of clay on the table. You put in a form of wood, you press with your hand, you cut with a metal trapezium with wire, which is producing an annoying stripe for the residue of clay on it. And then drying, baking, resting, then cutting, all 4 sides. So first part is how Columba brick is made by Petersen. Second part, finishing of the surface, and the cutting is our new invention. And now they're doing good business because it's discovered that cutting is good for many different other things. So it was good business also for them. Then failing a lot with mortar, and in the meanwhile it was Biennale, where I was invited, I don't know why, by Shelley McNamara and Yvonne Farrell, because they were all masters and I was no one, but more strangely to present a building which was under construction. And I was really embarrassed. So what I did was to dispose a narrative, trying to make people make their own story of what was under construction, in a kind, trying to be honest. But then also we made these brick sculptures which were for us a one-to-one test. Can we do this building? Can we do this facade? Okay, we entered, we placed it, but in the meantime also we're checking the three-dimensionality of the building, but this was when we were already at the second floor of the road construction. We made this woven model that I call the loom model, 42 kilometers of wire, which was a way to let people live and see all the labyrinthian mosaic of rooms, which are opaque, so they need to be cotton wire and no glass or plexi, quietly, but to see what we're talking about, what was in construction. And in that time, while we're doing the road construction, we were seriously busy with the facade, because the facade is experimental. Normally, with brick construction, as you know, there is like a structure, then you have normally isolation, so you avoid all the costs of a thermal bridge cut. And then you have a facade that normally is detached, should be structurally load bearing or has some hooks so it doesn't fall down. Because we are not like in the past where we have different hygrometric, thermohygrometric conditions in the interior, and we work with much smaller thicknesses of building elements. So we have drastically cut the gradient of softening the change of thermohygrometric conditions in material elements. The other way that you put the structure outside, and then you have to make a thermal cut, which is damn expensive and also can be risky in the building side. We needed to have a solid facade, which was continuous with no joints, because it was not a theme of joints, and we need to be solid so that kids could throw a ball and have the sound of a solid wall. But when we were talking, it was just, okay, you get, you should have a joint every 7 meters, 8. Okay, you are so annoying that we can get up to maybe 10, 12, but that's it. What a problem. So I started saying, what if we put only one, we fix the sides and we move in the center? No, we fix the fold and we move outside. What if we, in a way, let it move in 2 parts? Last is what we did. So this facade is free to move left side, right side, and in the fold. And here you see overlapping the facade drawings and the 1 to 10, no, 1 to 5, don't remember what scale, I see 1 to 10 plan and section, because that's how my mind works. I need to see things on a plural scale because I never trust my ability to remember things, so I need to see them. And this was when it was yet a kind of casted Roman masonry. But this is what we did, because as Cino said, you have to negotiate. So structure inside, isolation is 120 because we are not with Switzerland, so they are much softer with all the isolation. Then we have a sliding layer. Here we have a reinforced perforated brick masonry, reinforced per layer, and it is low, so 140. You have every 140, and you know that in construction, time is money. So normally you would use a 190 height block, but here we needed more reinforcement, so we kept lower. All sunk in bastard mortar, which means elastic, thanks to lime, but waterproof, thanks to cement. Then a 3-layer reinforced bonding layer, which is reinforced with a grid of steel and then of grids of polyethylene meshes. Then we have the brick, which is also structurally working with a full joint in full thickness of bastard mortar. And then last, the pigmented mortar, also bastard mortar. So until the bonding layer, it's like fish and chips in Belgium. Concrete, they eat it at breakfast. perforated masonry, they eat it at breakfast. The only part of invention was from the bonding layer on and the window sills. So reduce, frame where you devote research. These drawings 1 to 2 are abstract drawings, but these are the drawings we use to communicate. There are numbers, there are informations, but you also see they are questions. Through questions, we dispose a dialogue with builders and we negotiate pennies, but we also negotiate ambitions and we negotiate fears. So what we did, the facade of the perforated brick wall, all reinforced, because the principle that all this facade is like a ferrocemento, a ferromattone, so an iron brick, where everything moves, allowing a crack of 0.3 millimeter, 0.03 millimeter, so 1 hair. Calculated. It means that everything moves plus minus 3 millimeter, horizontal and vertical, with tolerance, because nothing is perfect in the world, plus minus 5, it means 1 centimeter, which is, I mean, my lighter is approximately 15, no? So it's a lot if that moves in front of a window, because you may hide the eyes of the window. And if you look down, you may read, no, it's blurry, so you cannot read, but basically every time there is a step in the foundation, there it was putting a flag, and I was obsessing going there. So obsessive that I had to plug in a piece of wood to remind workers to do not fill it in, so that it would allow movement of all the facade. Then it came the other part, which was to put, I'm sorry it's so blurry. It was better, my expert, I'm very sorry. The worker called me a Sunday saying, Francesca never asked for help in my life. A good man he is. But this time, I really don't know how to make this facade. I don't know how to start with the bricks. Why? Because we had tolerance of 3 millimeter, no tolerance. And normally, if you put just a thickness in between the bricks, you just go raising as a banana. And so nothing will match. But we were bound to the modus of the windows and the form, the decor of the window sill, which was not a decor, but just to disappear. So we had 3 millimeter up and down, vertical and horizontal of tolerance. Insane, because tolerance with masonry are in the range of 20-50. So what we did was to draw on the facade so that each worker would have his visual cone to work on. We will see more later. We studied how to make easy for them the joint and the folding. So it had to be, in a way, not on both sides, but bigger. So in this case, a joint is of 20, because if it is not on both sides, then you have to double it. And this is the facade, the tricks. So you see the reinforced masonry, which is all around, so that you diffuse a kind of homogeneous behavior of materials all around the perimeter of the sills. Then this was the nightmare of all the building site, really the real nightmare, the window sills, which is a 7 layers mortar, which was, well, we solved it at 3 months and a half from closing the building site. Can you believe that? Insane. Then you see all the work to make possible that the window is fixed to the structure. It means that here everything moves, you see, plus minus 5. It means that this point where there is my hand may go down 5 millimeter, up 5 millimeter. Therefore, we always want to protect 10 millimeter of the window. So can you imagine the workers, the tricks, the tools we had to build to make sure that they were precise in placing it? Like, reality is not a CAD. You need to just put a reference and make it real. It was fascinating. And then, of course, all the other details. Top, the ending of the roof, which is a very standard, conventional ronzincral, like scossalina cilindrica di zinco, but that also had to allow this movement. Otherwise, we would have had cracks. Cracks mean water infiltration, which means growing in volume as ice in winter, which means disaster. And towards a neighboring building, but also there tuning a detail so we would be quiet. What is it solidly in real? Waterproofing above the concrete blocks to avoid the risalita, the rise of damp. Then you see this brick masonry, all this is calc mortar that workers hate because it's very sticky, closer to chewing gum than to plaster. Then we have the reinforcement with additional ones where there were more cantilevers in the facade, resting in sun worker, exhausted, making the form, recycling the panels. The first 3 layers of the reinforced sill, this is with concrete, with steel mesh and calc lime cement mortar, drawing the facade with the bricks. One man, there were 4 in total, placing the 30,000 and more bricks. It was 1 square meter was 10 minutes, 3 to place the bricks and the others to tilt them on the X so that you would diffuse this irregularity. So keep squared in your meter, so we preserve the tolerances, but inside tilt it all so it's all according to each other. Additional safety joint, which is just a pipe of soft thing. So things in building site are not, there are things you see everywhere, very, very banal. Nothing is sacral. That's the beauty. Then you already start seeing the addition of the 5th layer of the window sill, which is still grayish. Only the last 2 are pigmented mortar. No, sorry, 4th. And then the last 3 are pigmented mortar with different grains. Here is my notes where I asked them to redo. And this was the criteria was only to avoid where there would have been teeth too evident because there is a radius in the joint that would have projected too long grazing shadow on, because it is oriented north-south, so it takes literally the sunset and the sunrise, so long shadows, and that would have been violent on the facade. But it was not about making it perfect. The opposite, just cutting the loud noises. I've been walking for days, everywhere. And now it's just serene. I'm very thankful to be away because I think that for me, everything, all the job is basically before, in my very slow time of thinking and trying to understand how to tune this dialogue, then I am at the service of the building and the people. And then I'm glad to disappear. That's the bless of our job, to disappear at the end. I do not really believe in authorship. I believe in buildings, as Cino does too. There is the water. There are the plants. Other people are living there. That's very fine. Larga is also in the same way, a quiet place where to lay. It is a chair where I wished to have a chair that allows you that freedom, that you can have it disappearing under a table, so it's quite low in its back, so you may forget it, that it may be wide, like an armchair, but it's a chair. that it would have been with 3 legs, so your legs could move in different ways, with different languages of your body, and still you would have your regality disposed, because every person is regal. It was a big struggle to find the form so that it would be welcoming the body and the hips, but not drawing them, so leaving them loose. At the same time, allow the limit of cantilever, of the cantilevering part, so you would not flip. First test was a failure. We were flipping down, but then of course that doesn't work. Then we started to learn from Japanese baskets or fishing nests. How can we keep the face of the chair with a center, when in all the weaving there is not really a center, it only has no center. And then how can we make the details of the chair gentle so that you can have pleasure in distractedly touch it everywhere, bottom, top, side? How can we make easy and light the mind of people, so making a real hidden wooden joint so you can forget about it and present people. The weaving at the end is something that when it's damaged, you just ship it like a pizza, but it is so. And it was really all a search for numbers. There is a double central ring where you are weaving first the outer ring and then the inner ring. It is divided in 8, 8 plus 4. That is the rhythm all around. So it could be solid, but kind. It's non-different from how we retune stories in the Bamboo Library Pavilion in Yangshuo. We were invited to make a library along this river, Yangshuo, for children of the village that could go there to read, but should also be a place for VIPs that, like filmmakers and actors, theater actors that go in a nearby hotel to have their holidays or to have cultural events. And we just wish to have a roof overlooking over the bamboo and a place for gathering. But that gathering in this landscape, which is like a fairy tale, it's not just a table. A gathering is a place where you share stories with food, with drinking. It is a place of the arts. So what I start always doing is to draw the context. And for me, drawing the mountains is already drawing the pavilion, because of this relation among living things with many different times. There is an invisible architecture or music of spatial relations among these mountains, which has a specificity which can be translated, non-transliterated. It means that there are some accents of height, and there is a space in between where light passes through, and I literally needed to carve and drop these shadows and light to understand or clarify an intuition, and then to start drawing an abstract geometry, which is a tool to coordinate potential spatial relations for this pavilion, which was meant as a bamboo construction where you have all a ground floor, which is the library, with a central staircase where you go up and you have a tea or a drink overlooking the bamboo and looking the river. This is top view, but this is the interest. This for me is the or the wish of tuning a relation with the context, which is non-figurative. It's not that you do it in bamboo because there is a bamboo, it would be stupid. And it's not about making a mountain. It is about a pacing of the in-between. There is also kind of continuous labyrinthian hypnotic experience when you are along this river, which is linear, but that meanderic, that you always feel like coming back where you came from. So it is the pavilion. You go around and around with depth. It happened that the client told us, okay, there are floods here, 3 meters. I said, okay, our pavilion is gone, so we need to lift it up. So 3 meters extra layer. And so came out, and we are so happy that, well, that we could have this chance of adding 1 floor, because now we have a cryptoportico in blue concrete. The cryptoportico is also hosting the staircase. So here it's all outdoor. Then you have a door, you enter the staircase, and those are just openings, kind of a homage to Borromini, to have some light, just to alive the center, which would be darkened. Then you come up, you have all the library because the shelves are here. You can go all around, so it's like a stage as well, and sit out and play with those mantus branches, or the kids can run everywhere. Then you go up in the staircase, which is an inner structure, and all around is just air and walls to reflect and produce the light effect. Structure of wood and the section. So I think this is very clear. Concrete making the base and up. And then you have this, which is wood, bamboo, wood, bamboo, 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 wood. We are preparing the prototype, which is learning and learning from how they make boats, no? So you make a form and you dispose all the bamboo, then you laser cut the form. It is easy to do today. And the bamboo, you just cut it, and they told us how much is the length you can have. But why bamboo? Well, there's plenty of bamboo there. It's the main source of material. It is a superhero material, but by law has no pedigree to be a building material. It is used for the temporary constructions. So we are declaring it as temporary construction, all the bamboo. So also their laws are human agreements that need to put measure and contain overall insanity, but they are human agreements that have always changed through time. And so we have to be intelligent in applying them and interpreting them. It is a woven structure, a principal test 1-to-1, 80 millimeter plus 30 millimeter and wooden blocks, because bamboo is a superhero material, but his kryptonite are insects. That's why he needs to be treated, bathed, and probably also burnt. We are studying that. And doesn't allow his fibers to be cut. Then no magical powers anymore. Why do you want to weave? For this. To have a rhythm. To tune a size. Is it to mime the bamboo knot? No, 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 no. It is to tune a size. Very different. And we are doing, in this case, we are not with Belgian builders, we are with a family. So we're going to have a kind of urban builder for the concrete part, as the engineers are urban metropolitan engineers, but we are with a family company in the fields for the bamboo. So every time it is just find the tools that make things real. Is there a tradition in invention, or as Omero said, is memory imagination, and is imagination memory? Mnemosine as art of all muses, because it is alive. Capretta is a table for Maniera, where just wished a small table for normal houses where you can always add a place where to sit. So no legs at the corners and no hitting the legs with your knees, but it would be with a finishing that where you could drop into a mythical storytelling, like looking into a volcano lake or in a poem of Leopardi like Il Cantico del Pastore Errante per l'Asia. And very simple. Very abstract. But Capretta is an homage to the rural tables of Tuscany. They had crossed leg to better hold the cantilever of skinny wood, but also allowed a free movement around the table. So it is Capretta because it is the tradition of Capretta. So what do we know of tradition? I believe that tradition, alike memory, is our ability to imagine and envision things around us that are the most normal things we live with as a story that hosts the stories which are antique and opens to new stories. A table is never a table. How many times you get lost in a surface? How many times you look out of the window of the tram? How many times you look at the rain, or you listen to the dripping of a tap which is leaking? How many times you look at the onions frying in the oil? Doesn't your mind needs both concentration and distraction? Can you deny that a soffritto awakens in you memories, maybe of a sunshine sometimes, or something else? All this long promenade, and I hope I did not bore you too much or disappoint you, is to share that I really, myself personally, I feel privileged to do this profession because it's a job, because it's an extraordinary observatory on human culture, which means life, not privileged culture, but real culture, which if men were painting 8,000 years ago dances, that is culture. It's not a social asset. I mean, social assets exist, they're important, as well as political experiments, ethical beliefs, even religions, but culture is holding, embracing them all. It's the biggest mystery. And I believe that basically everything exists, but it exists when it is alive for us. So all this profession is about listening and making things alive again because we see them. We make them alive for others. This happens in the mind. And how I must say it's still a mystery to me. So very few answers and much more questions. I thank you. Okay. Disappointed, bored?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe Cino wants to say something. We can start a conversation. And also we have the domesticity pictures that the students brought.
Yes, that one I would like to say something.
Okay.
Because that was a kind, we share with Cino this smile towards life. To be surprised in a way by unexpected gifts. But also it is about listening, observing. So I propose this thing that you would have 30 seconds with a postcard of what is home for you, a portrait and a sentence, because that is where everything starts, no? So we have like a Sherazade of 49, no?
Yeah. So maybe.
But first, I have a proposal that everybody switch on the microphone. Everybody switch on the microphone.
How nice to see more faces. Che bello.
Everybody. And then we do a clap.
Oh. It was a very felt talk. We've been talking a lot with Cino. We do share a lot.
Yeah, so maybe I think we can start with that kind of shared moment about.
To make Cino Zucchi wordless, it's something does not happen every time. So at this moment, I'm wordless. So that's quite an achievement.
Okay.
Thanks, Francesca. It was amazing. I mean, I think it was good. No, so I will leave. Let's say I don't want to say the stage. The stage to you and my students. This is also important. You know, you see how much you had a very strong thought. It's amazing. I think on the other side, you keep on. We were talking yesterday about this sharing culture. So I think the fundamental thing is about what you just said. So this idea of also of being able, today we close ourselves in many smaller protocols or disciplines which become like armors or things that cannot dialogue at anymore. I see more and more the building process having all these experts who they do just their own lecture, they close themselves, they protect themselves with protocols. And to keep this dialogue, to me, what you're doing is really amazing. And because we have, I really think architecture is a collective endeavor. We don't own our means of production. You can do your watercolors, but you cannot build your building with your hands. And that's the difference between an architect and other kind of artists who can, you know, so we cannot just hang our drawings on the wall. And to do that, we need to share practices and cultures. That's a fundamental lecture I have. Even if, when you were talking about laziness, it's interesting, you mentioned the word laziness. When we do things and we know how to do them, then you can get lazy because you repeat over and over a recipe which works, you know. And then
That you think
always, quoting Paul Valéry, he said, science is the ensemble of the recipes which always work. All the rest is literature. The issue of literature has to do with interpretation. So to use a language, which is, we could not do, we couldn't write a novel if we didn't share a language. So the language is given by society, but then the way you use words and you slightly deform their combination to give new meanings is the essence of poetry, you know. So that's what you're doing, pure poetry. Okay, I will leave you with the students. I mean, I'm here, but just I will leave the students to talk or to make you questions. I mean, it's a big occasion to have you here. So we will, you know, when you do the lemons, you have to
Squeeze.
squeeze the lemon. So we're gonna squeeze you like a lemon as long as you're here. Okay, so I leave my students squeeze you.
Okay.
Okay, maybe we can start sharing the pictures and have everyone sharing their work, and then we can have maybe a conversation. And if the students or any of us have some question, we can start. We can have a conversation afterwards, if it's okay for you.
Students, is okay? I
Yeah.
think it's nice if it's like rapid, no?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, actually, I have all the PDF, just an organizing thing. I have all the images, so I will share my screen. They're in alphabetical order, so when you see your image, it's going to be in order, so be prepared in a way, and you can start to read your sentence too,
And can you allow us also to see the person, right?
Yeah. I think you can unmute yourself and show yourself.
Good.
Okay, so let me just start sharing the screen. Okay. Acerbis.
Okay, I read the sentence. The exterior becomes interior, in which man lives and occupies space, and making it his own through a series of daily gestures and rituals, acquiring the characteristics of domesticity. Domesticity as the human will to build and create a space that can respond to his primary need.
Okay.
Thank you.
Al-Haddad?
Yes, this one is mine. But I don't think the sentence is enough to explain what I meant. So maybe I'll just explain a bit more. I'll read it first. Domesticity is a person's comfort space developed based on their ethnographic background. This picture is a traditional Lebanese house, and I believe that the comfort space, like just looking at the picture brings me comfort, because I believe that every person's home is based on what their culture and tradition is based on. So that is what represents domesticity for me.
I think your sentence was very clear.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe also cultural background.
Okay. Arriaga.
Hi. Domesticity has a lot to do with the repetition of practices, accumulation of routines, and memories. The degree of adaptation will depend on each individual and on the flexibility of the object. Domesticity is the extension of our body. For me, it's more like that.
Che meraviglia.
Thank you very much. Bacchi.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. So for me, domesticity evokes the idea of a world of our own that only we really know about it. And that's why I chose the image of a window that is like the threshold between the interior space that is familiar and comfortable and the outside one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bakic.
Hello, nice to meet you. Okay, warm, a chair, a fork, a window, a woman earring. This is something that is for me domesticity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Benincasa.
Hi, good morning. So an individual med space, extremely minimalized and reduced to the very essentials, a chair, a desk, a window, a setting for self-improvement and meditation, a parallel declination to the most collective, familiar, colloquial concept of domesticity. So a sort of personal corner studiolo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Botti Michela.
When during night the light behind a window is on, then you understand that there is a life. Domesticity is the shelter of our own privacy.
Thank you. Thank you. Kagla Senturk. Kagla Senturk. Are you here?
Sì, ma è muta.
Ah,
Yes. Can you hear me?
yes, thank you.
Sorry. I took this photo 2 years ago in Napoli. I think home is actually a means of expressing the differences, principles, and order of the individual. It works with the awareness of many opposing forces. It is much more than a living space because it contains power and even openness. It is a common point created by togetherness and life need. And in fact, real power was not only the presence in the person, but also the expression of all these feelings.
Can I participate too?
Yes.
Okay, so put my screen and I tell my idea of domesticity, okay?
Yes. Hold on. Let me stop sharing, Cino, so you can share. Okay.
Can you share my screen?
You can share it now.
No, but not a screen, just my video. Okay?
Yeah, we can see your video. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. My idea of domesticity is this.
Oh, Bigio.
Bigio me Catilina. Hey, I'm finished.
Thank you, Cino. So, okay, we were. Capone Valentino.
Important. My windows has been done by Lattice, and they're architects, and you see they have very low window sills. This is the architect's part. If you see my house, see how low you see the line of the parapet outside, but how low the windows are. You know, they're probably 45, 50 centimeters. They're a little bit like the size of the height of a chair, which is like 45 or something like that. So this gives a total different views of what is outside. Okay, it's really an invention in a way. It's not a floor to ceiling window. It's not a high parapet. I think this is what makes the marvelous, and this is the architect's designing that. You know, when Francesca was showing her house in Tuscany, you know, she decided to make small windows so you could only see outside when you're in. And this is fundamental. It's a very incredible gesture who changed in a way, my house and the way I live this house. It's not by me, it's by the architects building this house. And one last thing, my bedroom door has a door which is like 80, and then it has a side door which is 30, and is to take away the coffin when you die. I will show it to you. Let me just go to my bedroom. You see, the door has a side part to open only when you die, or maybe if you big furniture. So the person who drew this house thought about life, everyday life, but also death. It's important also.
Sì. È vero.
And once I found a friend of mine in the street, and his cousin is an architect. He's also the dean of a private important school. And I said, Giancarlo, how's it going? And he said, my mother died a week ago. And then we had to bury her in a family chapel, which was designed by my cousin, the architect. And then when they had to put the coffin in the family chapel, there was no size, could not enter. So they have to cut in two the coffin to take away the corpse of his mother and to put it back in. And he said, but you architects, when you design chapels, do you think that chapels are made to put the coffin in? I'm sorry to give this deathly feeling, but just, you have all these jokes about the architects who think about everything but the thing which is made of. I started laughing. I mean, even this guy was laughing on his mother's dramatic funeral, because architects, they do everything, but they do not think that chapels are made to put coffins in. But let's go back to life and Francesca.
The students, we go back to the students.
Yes, yes.
Okay, Capone Virginia. Capone Virginia. Capone Virginia.
Legge lei, Joseph, allora, se non c'è.
Yeah. Domesticity is an act of education of the body about the space. The body modulates itself until it finds the right measure in the space. The space comes under the control of and perception of the body. Ok, quindi passiamo a Carella Sebastiano.
I wrote, an open suitcase is the opposite of traveling. We open it before a trip or after returning from a trip. The cat represents the living flow of the lower space of the house. So domesticity is for me the hollow shape of the suitcase seen by the cat as a perfect, comfortable bed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Celli Francesca.
I tried to translate a quote by Pavese. It may be argued that symbols take root not so much in academic encounters as it does in very humble and unconscious contacts with ordinary and domestic realities. Not poetry, but a fairy tale, an argument, a prey, not a great painting, but an almanac, a print, not science, but superstition. So to me, domesticity is to live between contingency and the symbols.
Thank you.
What a wonderful work you all have done.
Chen Kaiwei.
This is the undecorated balcony of my
grandparents. The balcony is narrow and crowded with houseplants and some air-dried peppers for home recipes. The remained grafting on the brick wall is what I did at about 5 years ago. 5 years old. So this naked wall enables me to store the memory pieces of my childhood by accident. So I think domesticity is the traces of family members.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Shirley Louise.
So this is a personal picture. Domesticity is a state of being at home with family, domus meaning home in Latin. This image represents a view from my home, a place where we used to gather. Serenity and simplicity of the space gives us the opportunity to reflect on the notion of family and the bonds coming from it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
very much. Curia Martina.
Hi, good morning. This is a picture that I took some years ago in front of the Arsenal of Biennale di Venezia. And for me, domesticity is wherever there is a habit of daily life, so a gesture of daily life in every space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
De Almeida Marinho, Anna Clara.
Good morning. For me, domesticity can be seen as a feeling of comfort, feeling good somewhere. Oh, sorry, my camera is... Sorry. Feeling good somewhere, something that reminds of home, that makes you feel welcome, calm, and free. The idea of a place of your own, a comfort place where you can be in harmony with yourself. A floral ceiling composition represented in the photo by the grass, wall, and trees, probably meaningless to other people, but unique for you, an extension of yourself. An architectural composition, as ever architecture should be, designed for people, for its use and well-being.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dini Francesco.
I choose this photo of my table prepared for breakfast because I think that domesticity is a ritual, such as put the same thing at the same place every day.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Francesco. Garipova, Asia.
Good afternoon. Domesticity is a deep feeling that every one of us knows, the feeling of warmth, safety, and care. We were all cells surrounded by other cells that took care of us. We are all now little creatures in the universe that takes care of us. Domesticity is a feeling that's always with us, the feeling of being an independent unit in continuous communication with the environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gogo Derin.
Hello. To me, domesticity is what turns a space into a place we can call home. So what could portray domesticity better than every changing view from the concealed part of our domiciles, allowing to interconnect different lives through a simple cross line?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goy Elisa.
Good afternoon. So domesticity is a space devoted to the inner self. Sometimes it might be individual, sometimes it might be shared. In any case, cozy, personalized, and traces of spirits can be found. This picture is taken in an harmonious and traditionally everyday life convivial space, personalized and full of life, as evidenced by its organization and single elements. So what I wanted to point out was that humans characterize the space and passions or thoughts can be, let's say, put into a space. So the relation between the space and the human. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Guercia Raffaele.
Hi. This is the studio of a famous artist, Francis Bacon, and the quote is from Bacon itself. So I feel at home here in the chaos because chaos suggests images to me, and in any case, I just love living in chaos. If I did have to leave and I went into a new room, in a week's time, the thing will be in chaos. I don't like things to be clean. I don't want the place and the things to be filthy dirty, but I like a chaotic atmosphere. So for me, Bacon has found this place and he feel at home, and he used also the dust of the floor to give a materiality to his work. So for me, this is domesticity.
Okay. Thank you. Hengyue Wang. I'm sorry.
Yes. I have a very big family, so for me, the domesticity is like a small society. We need to maintain the relationship with each family member, and I also have different responsibilities for different membership, like grandparents. I need to take care of their health, and for some young brothers or sisters, I need to solve their growing problems. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hongyi Lee.
Yes. And I choose a picture of a messy dining table. For I think dining table is a furniture that all the family have. It's just a small rectangle or circle area, however, can get the whole family gathered together to share food and time. At a dining table, family will naturally begin to communicate. The longer the dinner lasts, the more family members attend, the messier the table will be. So in some way, a messy dinner table demonstrates a harmonious domesticity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jérôme Thomas.
Hey. So for me, domesticity means to feel at home. In this case, it's a space that can be appropriate and that evolves over time without being defined in a radical way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jinghang Chen. Jinghang Chen. Okay, maybe I read it.
Yes.
Home as a safe, quiet.
Oh.
Hello.
Yeah. For me, domesticity is home as a safe, quiet, and personalized place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jingping Lu.
Good afternoon. For me, the domesticity has more or less a smaller core like the lab in this photo I took in Shenzhen, which is the most narrow city in China. And the lab has a sense of reputation, but it can still illuminate the families and warm the passerbys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Malitesta Chiara.
I'm here. Hi, nice to meet you. Well, for me, domesticity, domesticity as a sensation capable of being defined in space by a boundary, the threshold. It's an element of border and passage and an element of opening the perimeter, generating a dissolution of the physical boundaries between inside and outside. The threshold space is the true place of domesticity and the space in which it begins and ends.
Thank you.
Thank you. Magrishivli Aftandil.
Hello.
Hello.
At home, you return an intimate realm of you in which you store and occasionally remember. They are in boxes on shelves, leaning against the wall, silenced, hushed, piled. Are everything the home is not, are everything the home is. Thus, synthesis by the embodiment of the entities changes the perception of domesticity in a manner that the domesticity's whole immense essence could be contained in a crowded, tiny room whenever a person enters it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Muller Sara.
Hi, good afternoon. For me, domesticity is not a question of space, size, or comfort. The environment and the people are a key source. Domesticity does not have to be connected to a certain place because you can feel at home anywhere in the world. Therefore, domesticity is rather a feeling than a place for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Muscat Leonie.
Hi. For me, domesticity means feeling comfortable in places of silence and relaxation. The natural environment plays an important role as well as the relationship between size, form, and materiality. Domesticity begins where you like to be, whether alone, with friends, or family. Untouchable, intimate, and warm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mual Garima. Muval Garima. Okay. Each time I visit this corner of my house, the time rewinds to that very first day I sat on this swing. That memory, the feelings are stored so strong in my mind. Through the trees have grown tall all around, the buildings have changed, the people around also changed, but what stays intact is the happy place of mind.
Che bello.
Ninkovic Konstantin.
Domesticity is a prime example of the evolutionary path of rectifying our world. The moment of creation of our first rectangular bed was the moment we put our world into a box, and we can never escape it.
Whoa!
Thank you. Oskara Gotznats.
Hello.
Hello.
I wanted to describe my room with a simple illustration, and for me, domesticity is the feeling of warmth and safety. It is not just a spatial, but also a symbolic arrangement of the interiors as a home. A room is a quiet space, and the atmosphere we live in becomes warm, homey, and cozy due to the use of tangible things like material, color, light, and texture, or here, like an object, a cultural element. For example, the Armenian carpet that represents my culture and has a meaning for me. And about the things that are less evident, but still a matter of design, like intimacy and belonging to the place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Perez Guillermo. Guillermo.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Domesticity for me is adapting your surroundings to reduce, whenever possible, human suffering. This creates a symbiotic relationship with our built environment because the space in which we live will in turn change our behavior too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rocio Sofia Ramirez.
Hello, nice to meet you. So for me, domesticity means safety, serenity, calmness, interiorization, rest, renewal, recovery, and pleasure. And in addition, I believe that is within us and within ourselves as an essential part of our identity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Savorelli Alessandra.
Yes, hi. Okay, so this picture represents my concept of domesticity, the state of being at home, alone, or sharing space and habits with other people. The table in this case is the core of the house, as it performs different functions throughout the day. It creates a convivial and private environment at the same time. This is also made possible by the use of the glass, in this case. And the latter plays a dual role, is a filter that connects two areas through its transparency and permeability, and at the same time, the glass is a divider of spaces, making them independent where everyone has their own living space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tardini Bianca.
Yes, hello. This picture is actually part of a series I took during the quarantine in February, when we had to describe our home through pictures. So for Sylvia Plath, domesticity is an ultimate concern, whereas for me, especially during these trying times, it's a heaven to crawl back to, ever so defeated when the outer world has once more let us down. So domesticity is the comfort of found in routines and often clashing gestures performed so many times they have achieved perfection, and the solace that the illusion of such a thing carries along. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Turtula Ilaria.
Hi.
Hello.
For me, domesticity is about sharing little joyful everyday life moments together. That's why I choose this photo as this quote by Pascoli. Close to the fireside, little by little, no one trembles anymore. No one is moaning anymore. They are warm, and it's not the fire that warms them, but the sweet being together.
Thank you very much. Voroshilova Natalia.
Good afternoon. For me, domesticity feels when observing the outside world from your own controlled environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vashitskits Ines.
State of being in the constant and unconditional sense of safety, feeling united and belonging to it. In Portuguese, the word saudade describes the bittersweet emotion of happy agony. Saudade is present in one who truly felt domesticated. It motivates returns to it.
Thank you very much. Zanella Luigi.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Domesticity. I close my eyes, put my hand on the tap until the water is hot, and then I started to see myself, my thoughts, my past, and my future. I have never felt so at home as when I live in myself, under the shower.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Zhongwei Sun.
Yeah, this is the photo I took during the lockdown in Wuhan in January, and I find this is the ideal place of my home. It's the composition of fragments, the old wood chair from my grandpa and the wares of the very poor Wi-Fi projector, and the sunshine and the shadows of all the objects. I think real life is quite a mess, but the composition of these fragments and the projection of the fragments, like memory or whatever, they represent the beauty of the domesticity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Zuri Uzie.
Uiza.
Uzie, I'm sorry. I'm terrible. I'm sorry.
Okay, to me, the picture in the left side shows the two posters hanged on my wall in my home country. And I used to take them in Germany, in Milan as well, and I used to hang them wherever I work. And this, in a way, creates a different atmosphere in all of these three spaces till now. So to me, the domesticity is the way we give meaning to a place and how we keep it in our memory. Even the random building represent themselves in a unique way, which will always reflect differently with their scent or with their ambience. It cannot be moved, copied, or adapted to another place because it will lose the originality and the intensity. We might feel this sense in many other places in our life, but it will always differ from one another, as we see our domesticity from our window and from the others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
What a landscape of thoughts.
Yeah, these were all the images and the sentences. So
I don't know how it was for you students, but I found extremely interesting your work. It is in a way very precise and sometimes words are sharper than the images, sometimes the image sharper than the words, but mostly they work hand in hand. And in all cases, mostly, not all, there is like underline the question, what is the perception of the surrounding context allow me to perceive that domesticity? So how is the distance between two parts of a building that allow me to have that reflection or that glimpse to another place? In others, you were almost tracing miniatures or hinting spatial relations among places, like there was, I don't know, like there was the photo by Bacon, by Raffaele, that it was all a miniature. So imagine how dense can be that apartment, but then you have the mirror, which is opening up a view. Or you had a realm of one's own that was really like a space. So what is the dimension of that space and how should be the light so that you perceive it as a unity? Or there was last song with the a corner, the theme of a corner, no? What makes a corner through light or shadow? Then there was others that domesticity in the sense of a house is that of being, giving and leaving the city, so to light the light or offer the balconies so that you are part of the street, like being home is being part of the street. And then there was like Perez, a space in the space in the space, but with air. And how do you create how do you translate in an apartment, the openness of this landscape and the shower? How can you translate that into an apartment? Or others was Sophia. I cannot even read my writing. Then there was Bianca, Silvia Plath. So many. So I'm very impressed. I could work with my mind through projects. And I think I got a gift today. For me, I don't know how it is for you, but it's you can trace so many lines, negotiating how you're going to be next to the building, how you're going to relate to the garden in the back, how you're going to invent that garden, that scene, the relation with the street. But in all your portrait and words, there is a lot of specificity. So even if you speak about balconies, well, how do you make that real? If you speak about recognizing identity, how you make that real, that belonging? How do you recognize an individual home into an a building of student apartments? No, How can you make there still one house recognizable? I'm thinking of Salima in the beginning, no? With the, or I'm sorry that you are so many and I didn't note all the names and all, or there was also this kind of observer of Natalia, no? A controlled view. How do you have to dispose the space, interior space around the window, and how much extends your building to have that view or does not extend? What defines that view? I had to think of Hitchcock. And my big question was for Constantine, if I may. Is Constantine gone? No.
No, I'm here. So,
you said we can never escape it. In the moment we do, like, people have been, I have myself been sleeping everywhere, like on grass field, on the shore, in even a closet. I was curious, it was quite, there was such a high degree of disappointment in your statement.
well, depends on how you look at it.
Can you help me?
Yes, my observation was that in residential architecture, we are bound to having rectangles and not to have curves, because we are bound by the shape of the bed, which is bound by our our topological representation of our body.
Now I understand better what you said, because it is funny how an Egyptian bed is so similar to a bed today. It's crazy, but I don't find it anything bad, negative on its own.
I didn't say anything negative.
And so I understand, but there is a kind of almost a punk provocation in saying there should not be dictated how to live. That I completely agree. I imagine that is also why you are in the atelier of Cino Zucchi, which is totally supporting the openness of confronting with what is different, what we do not know. But then also to comfort you, I think that conventions, if you take a humanity historical perspective, they always have short legs at the end of the day. So maybe I will not see the end of this convention in my length of life, but I bet that you will see it. So to have a kind of ease with that. But then there is a kind of, then the question would be renewed for you, then what makes a place where to sleep worth being there to sleep? Is it about having a view or having the reflection of a light? So just turning where you sleep in the other way around. And forms matter, but not in their absolute terms. So like I have had an experience of teaching in Bergen. Now it's my 4th year, it's my last one there. And in the beginning, they were all, they had the fear of symmetry and geometry. So like the opposite. And for me, like there is no evil in a triangle, in a rectangle, in a square, in a circle, in a parabola, in a free form, like they're just forms. Then they hold meaning, but not only the form itself. So it depends. It is a relation among forms that build a story. So in that sense, I feel more relaxed.
Well, I think that the form of a bed is not induced by free will of creating a form on itself. I think that the form of the bed as we know it, the regular bed, the rectangular bed, is implied by the very nature of how our body, our physical representation of the body, presents in a space itself, and it has nothing to do with our imagining of the shape of the bed. Because when you observe a human body in a topological sense, we are in fact a roller. And when somebody lays down and when somebody sleeps, as in a conventional way of sleeping, I'm not going into special kinds of, I don't know, you mentioned you once slept in a closet.
Because there was no space and the floor was cold.
Yes, but the
normal life, exactly.
The regular sleep, a regular human who sleeps, he sleeps in a way that he's in effect a topological roller, and the only imprint he can print on a flat surface is a print of a rectangle, and any shape other than rectangle is purely excess of material, purely. I mean, the basic module of residential space is in fact a rectangle. And I think that when people realized that they should be sleeping on rectangles and not ovals or caves or something from, I don't know which shape, then they began to form rectangular houses, not oval houses. And then they became, you mentioned Egypt and the Egyptian bed, and we know that in ancient Egypt the whole urban layout was immediately rectangle, and I think that the form of today, as in all of our electronics, our furniture, the rectangles got in. I mean, when you look around yourself, all you can see is the majority of things you can see are rectangles, and I think that is the box we were bound to by not inducing our free will.
But Konstantin, I must disagree with you, because it is not true that everything around is a rectangle, because if you walk just in Milano, you find so many, imagine even the streets are sinuous many times.
Yes,
no?
but I thought in your immediate surrounding, in your household, the majority of things, the majority of products as commercial products are in fact rectangles. Even cars are, when you look at them, are sort of a rectangle.
In reality, they are almost a little bit, some are a little less rectangle than in the 70s. But I wanted to make a point, because I kind of, you do what you want, but my kind of attention to cut black and white, the reality around, may be helpful to clarify the point you want to make. But if you really look around, it is not exactly like that, just down to earth. Okay, it's a rectangle, but this has soft corners. And another thing is that also the production of subforms related to technical means and availabilities, no? So to tie, like if you want to, you said not the body to, also when there were injured people, not the way to carry easier was to have 2 sticks and a cloth, or like the camping place where you sleep. Indeed, it's rectangular kind of, but it is a mixture of things, not only one thing because the body is rectangular or because there is an imposition of things. I find that to me, it a little bit scares me, this way of thinking, when it is that dogmatic. Even like the dogmatism of the anti-dogmatic scares me as much as the dogmatism. I like, in a way, openness, so to just check what are the conditions and what is the surrounding. And I'm going to open now my window in Genova, no, to show you. Sorry, I was stumbling. You see how many forms?
Yes, but they are all scattered rectangles, in fact. I mean, when you put a human,
you don't look careful enough, I must say. Sorry, I make you a critique. I would put you like a game. No, you should come here to Genova and prove me that the church is a rectangle.
Yeah, but I need to clarify that the relationship between the human and surroundings outside the house, outside the flat, outside the room are not the same as a relationship between human in a flat, because in a place where you sleep, where you reside, the majority of time you're laying down. I mean, you're sleeping, for example, human beings sleep 8 hours a day, and they're not spending 24 hours a day at home. So the time when they're not at home, forms should not be bound by rectangles. Formed, as you stated, the streets are curved, the parks, everything is not a straight rectangular as in Manhattan, but when you go inside the flat, and you go inside the module of a flat.
It's not a point of the ventre of the mother. It is because there is a topography. Sorry, because I find really a little bit scary your way of thinking. It's not about the form, because you can make the religion of the curve as well as the religion of the rectangle. No, that is something that is scaring me, because the roads are sinuous because they follow topography. There are historical cities most of the time. If you also read Camillo Sitte book, or if you read a pattern language, there are beautiful books to read. And there is really this element of time and of layering in a landscape, so that literally in most of our cities of Europe, which is the context I know the best, I feel incapable to speak of the world. I don't know enough, no? But in Europe, most of the historical cities basically are showing still their original settlement, even if it has transformed so much. And so there is, and the first settlements related to a topography. And even if it is a valley of a river, it is a topography. That's what I'm trying to say. It is not a curve versus rectangle, because then those medieval houses which are accompanying on topography along a curved line following the meander of a river, then they were often rectangle because it was the most efficient and logical way to build, to make a corner. But there are also so many exceptions. So I'm just trying to nuance this strong declaration you're making that is scaring me. It sounds like a religion of the curve. I'm agnostic.
Yeah, but the point you said is that they follow the line of the river, they follow the topography, and the fact that they use corners, the fact that they use rectangles are because they stack efficiently and in a way of creating a corner. And I wanted to stress out that we use a corner of a 90 degrees. We don't use a corner of a 120 degrees like a hexagon. The hexagon is the most efficient way of layering a surface. And that's the thing, because we use a 90 degrees angle is because of a thing that we did not choose, but that was imposed on us by our bodies.
Okay, I just hope that you're not going to impose yourself to everybody you're going to meet.
No.
Can I intervene for a moment? I have a circular bed with flashes, with neon lights, and you have sighting. you know, because at a certain age you need some stimuli to
you need
but no, it's a joke. But I would intervene this way because I agree with Francesca. But basically, I would say in a very empirical way that on the horizontal surface, what is called the polygons, the regular polygons, which fill the space in a continuous way, it's the equilateral triangle, the square, and the hexagon, as you said. You know, but then the easiness of the square, so the 90 degrees angle, is because you can stretch it more and then whatever position. So there is a reality in saying that in Amazon, whatever, in this moment, some robots in Amazon are lifting packages, and packages are parallelepipedy because they stack better and they're more interchangeable. So whenever you have to stack things, it's more probable that to do that, okay? Because you need to be together. Of course, bees, in a way, a beehive is hexagonal. Basically, if you put together 6 circles around the center and then you pack them, in a way, the hexagon of the bees is many bees doing rounds and then they push. So it's what is called Dierchitlecht tessellation, like in cells. So in a way, if you compress circles, you get hexagons or irregular hexagons like in the bird tree. So then there's another figure, it's called the craquelet. I just draw in while you were talking. This is a figure which is of the porcelain, is also a figure of when in some natural elements you do have, let's say, if something dries up and loses dimension like fungo, like mud, if you have a layer of mud and then it dries, you lose its water and it shrinks. And then things that shrinks tend to break along perpendicularly to the tension force. But then if you look at the hidden law of the craquelet, this kind of pattern, is that when lines join, they tend to be very close to 90 degrees angles. So if you notice the craquelet, you can have curved lines. But then when a minor line forms, because usually you have a first break and then a second break and a third break, let's say the one I'm marking are mostly 90 degrees angles, okay? So we can go look at some kind of natural pattern of forces. There was this beautiful book, it's called On Growth and Form by Darcy Thompson. He tries to read all natural animals like a stegosaur, like this, applying physics, okay? Some crystal, the other day I was showing to a friend, if you look to bismuth crystals, crystals amaze us because they are, or snowflakes, because we look regularity in these shapes. Why we collect crystals or snowflakes? Because we have a feeling of regularity, okay? Nature producing patterns. You have, you know, Francesca showed the marvelous patterns of fishes while she was doing her kimono, okay? So we are amazed, you know, by cauliflowers who look like fractals. Whenever we see nature generating in flowers, in regular forms, these things. So going back to your things, I don't think the bed is rectangular because it's shaped like a human body. I can also sleep in a coffin like an Egyptian Tutankhamen, you know, not to move too much, you can sleep in there. And the question about cushions, and if you look in Egyptian museum, what we use as a cushion is a wooden thing, which is shaped like that. And then, for example, in Iceland, they don't live, the old Icelandic people, they did not live in bed, but in sofas. They slept sitting down, which is sort of shocking. So there could be an endless talk. I agree with Francesca that Constantine, when we go on experience and we tend to generalize laws, we need some degree of generalization, but then we should not get this law a universal, whatever you generalize. Then we could go into the concept of induction and deduction. You know, if I have a bag of white beans, I take out 1,000 white beans. Can I say, this is a bag of white beans? Maybe the 1,001st is a black one. So we could talk about Popper and falsification of theories. We can go there. But my point is how much in some of the, it's interesting because in some of the exercise you showed about domesticity, some people started a bit more about their direct experience, okay, almost an existential one. Some, whenever you put it in language, the phrase you use, some use quotation, that's an interesting thing. Some, they seem a little bit not to look at the thing as it is. Since there's no Cino Zucchi talk without a Paul Valéry, one or more, 3 or 4 quotations, I remember when I wrote the book about the housing as Nagavender, I quoted another thing by Valéry said, when we think, words tends to overlay to experience. When people think of a house, for them, they think more to the concept than to the sensation of a house. The idea that it's a white body, and as you change around the size of windows and the reflection window changes, they don't see it. They think of the beautiful places that they ignore them. Whenever we have a world, can it be resilience, can it be nanotechnology, it can be hybrid, the world describes a reality, and then it starts to be autonomous, and then you repeat a hybrid building, and you don't even know what the hybrid building is. The Basilica Palladio is a hybrid building. So words are sometimes very useful to describe, but sometimes they can be very dangerous because you think only of the world and not anymore of the phenomenon. So we always oscillate between direct experience, empathic, I would say, experience, and stereotypes. That's exactly what Francesca is working on, what she's saying. Only direct experience, it always starts anew. If you only trust yourself, you can repeat things that people invented 100 years ago. We need collective knowledge in medicine, in the arts, in the sciences. I mean, think of the sciences. Probably a 5-year-old kid today knows more than a Greek at the time of Aesculapius. In the sciences, it is given that individual experience is based on a pyramid. Sometimes it falsifies it. In art, I don't know. So, when we do art, I use for a moment this word, should a painter be what we call a Sunday painter, go out in the, whenever I eat fig in India figs, they have all these incredible colors. Every time I eat an India fig, I say, I want to paint them. I've been trying, for years. And on the other side, does a painter has to know about Velázquez? How much the experience of Goya and Velázquez enters in the act of a single person painting? Because Francesca also showed, she's a Sunday painter in a sense that the cover you did, she did it on Sunday. So Francesca is a Sunday painter. Anyway. In Italian, Sunday painter is dispregiativo, is a bit contempt. It means somebody who tries to do something without the experience of others. This dilemma cannot be solved between collective knowledge with the risk of being stereotyped or not thinking in your own head. When you say, think out of the box, think of your own head, be different, be yourself, there's something wrong with it. On the other side, if you only do what people taught you, you never think with your own head. As Francesca was quoting Christopher Alexander, sometimes I quote a beautiful text of Douglas Hofstadter. It's called Variation on the Themes at the Crux of Creativity. Hofstadter criticizes what is called lateral thinking of the Americans, Bono, or, the paradigm is, let's say the paradigm is there, so you have to jump somewhere else. Always the American says, new kind of science, this idea of invention. Douglas Hofstadter says that if you take a known game, something you know, like a chess game, and then you introduce a small variation, and then you pursue the consequences of these small variations, you find yourself in regions which are very far and very different. He's talking about the slipping of concepts. I think Francesca showed a beautiful attitude between experience of others, of practices, of shapes, of this, and thinking with your own head, which cannot be taken back, neither by the beginner's idea, okay, I'll do it my own, without knowing, and is not even the pedantic, I don't know how I say in English, the scholar who before doing your own, you have to study everything before you, okay? It's not even in between, it's a mixture of these two things. So going back to that, if we get too stuck in categories, other people, we have to free themselves. And then when we get intuitive, then you can say, hey, somebody else already thought about it. You think you're the only guy in the world. It's a balance between two dimensions that will always be. It's important. And so, some people, they shake your hand and say, hey, please don't squish my hand. You're breaking my hand. Some people, they give you a very lovely idea. So to some people, you have to say, trust in yourself, like this. Some people, you have to say, hey, cool down, guy, you think too much of yourself. So there's not one way of teaching. My point is that the method of educating children and the methods of teaching, they cannot have the same efficiency of different people. Some people need support, some people need more freedom. To some people you say, hey, look at the rules. To some people say, hey, free yourself from the rules. So I don't have one method of teaching in a way. We just need, in experience, to find the right balance. So I would say, I stay on the side of Francesca because constantly I find him too rigid, but there is some truth in what he's saying about. So I think the winning of the rectangle is not so much because of the body, it's because it's a conventional standard. It's like one last thing. There's this marvelous author, it's called Stephen Jay Gould. He's a post-Darwinist, and he talks about the history of science. And he made a marvelous article about why the QWERTY keyboard. And he went back why it is so. Many people think because it's to make things quicker. Basically, it is made so because the early typing machines, before computers, the mechanical typing machines, the first one, the sheet of paper was flat, and there was some kind of crawling up things. So whenever two things got stuck, you had to dismantle all the machines. So the QWERTY is made to make the two keys of, for example, in English, TH, which when you have THE, they have to be as distant as possible. So it's not made to speed up. It's made not to get this conflict. Then I had a context between like Olivetti and Remington, something that went. So the QWERTY was one of the two. He got a standards like Windows as opposed to Linux. So he makes this an example that not necessarily, as in nature, not necessarily the best organism wins, but if an organism gets better, gets more numerous, it gets a standards, like in fascism or Nazi. When a population gets too big, it kills all the other one. Like, for example, pine trees in forest. You know why forest I made only of pine trees? Because the pine trees modify the chemistry of the soil not to make other plant appear. So you see, when you have a pine tree forest, it's only pines, it's not mixed. All these things happen. So in a way, I agree that rectangular things are a standard, that if I pick, this is an A4 things, okay? It's invented by the Germans with the DIN. The A4, A3 system is based on the square root of 2. In a sense that if I fold it, I get half of the surface, you know, and this is 7.07 dimension. And if I fold it again, I always get the same proportion. This is a quarter, but the dimension is half. So basically it's based on a proportion of 1 to square root of 2. And the faculty is that I can fold it to the infinite. So you have A4, A3, A2. So each next is double the area and 1.4 whatever, or 701. So now the Germans invented it, and if you go to the cartolaio, you pick some papers, you don't have any time to describe it. It's an easy thing. So once I'm not saying this is universal. It's a commodity. It's something to make life easier. Okay. Sometimes we have to rediscuss it. We can make books which are not A4, but then standards are made to quicken up our decisions. You know, what are spoons? So in a way, it's true the rectangular, it's a sort of an expectation. Okay, zip my mouth.
No, but myself, I wanted to thank Konstantin because I value the honesty of speaking out the words, your thoughts. I mean, it's important, no? Just what Cino has said much better than me. I think we are sharing this an invitation to openness to differences, because there are, really there are. And I was trying to send you the scan of the book Growth of Form and Form, but there is, do you have a colleague, Niccolo Battilana? I was trying to send you on the chat the file, but I'm not succeeding, but I was able to send it to Niccolo Battilana. Ah, ecco, se è un collega.
Yeah, he's not in the studio, but
he is a student, right?
He's a friend of ours who's attended as an external, but we can find a way to get it to, or maybe
I am capable if he can forward it to Constantine. It's the book that Cino mentioned.
Nicola Battilana, he sent it back to Constantine.
Okay.
Can I also say something about what
Yes.
Constantine did?
Yes.
Like my impression, like I don't think it's only a kind of like think about the rectangular as something, as a standard, but I think it's also more in a philosophical way, as Platon or Aristotle, I don't know how it is in English, says about how people knows and perceives the reality. So speaking about categories in the sense of Aristotle, and ideas in sense of Platon. And so when we observe the reality, our mind tries to abstract things. So even if I want to abstract the human body, I can say it's a rectangular and the face is a circle or an oval. Even if our face is not a standard imposed by the society in a sense. So I think it's quite normal to abstract things, but at the same time, as we said, as it has been said, I think it's quite boring in a sense. I mean, you lose all the beauty and all the qualities of life if you just perceive reality by abstracting things. It's like
I find you in these talks a little bit conservative. Really, I'm impressed. I think I have double of your ears and I'm more open. It's surprising, this thing. Basically, sorry if I'm going to do a shake of reality check. What happens with flat surfaces? You get a line and then one part is in shadow and the other is in light, and you have a clear difference. If you have a curved surface, you have a nuance of light and shadow. Can we check reality and what really happens in real? And then maybe one time you need to have a gradient of light, another time you need to have a break. My question is, what is that for? What's the purpose? What the meaning? What the story behind that?
Yes, exactly. I mean, like if you just live
also
the
bringing
reality by abstracting
reality.
is like not living in a sense.
If also reality that this produces certain shadows, and then if I fold, I have another thing happening. So real world. We need the world, the things around, to touch, to look at, to understand what happens in real. It's.
Can I also add one more thing related to what you just said? At first, I want to say that I didn't really get the same impression about Constantine's image and sentence. I understood it in a totally different way, but it's a different topic. But for what you were saying at the end, I agree with the idea of the square or rectangular shape being more popular, but I don't agree with the idea of it being something wrong, because I believe that every single object, even for example, let's say a mug, okay, it's circular in shape, but if it's circular for a reason, so I believe that each shape is done depending on the use or the function, yeah, exactly, of what it is supposed to do. So the circular part of the mug is for me to be able to drink in an easier way. So as Professor Cino was saying, of having, for example, the paper as an A4, like if it was circular, I wouldn't really understand how to read from it. And if the mug was square, I wouldn't really understand how to drink from it. So every single object has a different shape based on what makes it easier for a person to use. And I believe that it's the same when it comes to architecture and designers. So I believe that what we do, or what our work is to try to help the people in their daily life, and us experimenting with different shapes is what helps us try to achieve a better situation for the people. So yeah, that's what it is.
Totally agree with
I
you.
don't know if it
I
makes
agree.
sense,
I
but
agree
yeah.
with Salima 100%. That was my point of why the bed is rectangular, how you use it. You cannot use a bed efficiently if it's not a rectangle, and that is imposed by not our free will, but our anatomy. That is the point I was trying to make.
Maybe I misunderstood, but I think the word is imposed. Like tools to work the earth, to dig, have improved, but strangely they are quite similar from 2000 before Christ till now, because just works good. Or
yes,
also the forcola is a very apparently free form, but it is shaped to work at best as engine, let's say, and as direction in the boat. So, and other things are, but I don't think it is, one side is use, comfort, gesture, it's not only that. And for myself, I don't think I have enough brain, and I will not live long enough to understand everything of the world, and I'm glad of that. So my call for myself is to keep open and searching and listening, and be open to change your mind. That's like the essence of my message.
I just shared my screen because while you were talking, I thought somebody gave me years ago a little book by Simmel. Simmel, he's a German philosopher. It was about Rembrandt, the self-portrait of Rembrandt. And he was talking about the dilemma in 1700 painting between the concept of type and individuality. He said the northern countries they tend to make very individual portraits, while the Italian with the Carracci brothers, the post-mannerist, I would say, time, they look for the more general thing. It's a famous anecdote that Caravaggio used to paint a Madonna. He used a model of a dead woman, the drowned woman in the Tevere, and then people got a scandal, say, how can you represent the Madonna using a popular woman? So if we have pimples, if I make a portrait of somebody and in that moment somebody smashed his nose or had a pimple, would you represent the pimple? So in a way, how much you represent reality. In these things I'm sharing the screen, in Byzantine or Egyptian mosaics of painting, there is a quite standard way of representing the human face. Maybe all the saints are equal, they look the same somehow, okay? But then if I take a portrait of Rembrandt, no, Rembrandt made self-portrait of himself all along his life. You can see all his life. And then there's a moment Simmel says that in the individual dies, the type does not die. And then he ends up saying that to him, the portrait of Rembrandt are in a way start from individuality, but then they get to a more general, in a way, feeling. It's not just him, you know. This is true sometimes when we have faces like Rita Levi-Montalcini or Einstein. They represent an individual, but they also represent the type of the scientist. I think in Italy, Rita Levi-Montalcini is not just a scientist. Very few people know what she did, but she looks like a scientist. No, Morgan Freeman as an actor, he looks like whatever, you know. It's an interesting question. So this dilemma between type and individuality, to me, is another key. No, if you somehow, can we do something which is specific, but with some connection is also, it can be useful for other things. Let me make a last example. If now I will make a lecture about how can you make classicity modern times, okay? There's many examples I could use, but probably if I take Mies van der Rohe National Museum in Berlin, I will probably use more that than other, because you can say the National Gallery by Mies van der Rohe is made fully of steel, but it's certainly that Mies van der Rohe tried to you know, not just, it's not such a very good museum in a way. So if you go in it, you can have a lot of defects as a gallery or museum, but certainly in our mind is, you know, a modern attempt to make classicity. It's like a temple, you know, modern. When I use this example, it means that I'm using a project which has a place and a time there, but at the same time, the fact that I use it as an example, it means for me has a more general meaning, no? Like with people, when we do quotations, when we do that. So it means I take an individual thing and I use it as a token or as an example to explain myself on another thing. The risk of this is doing bad quotation. Since Mies van der Rohe did that, if I do it also, you know, I'm like that, you know, my phrase, your dark glasses will not make you read. So I quote a lot. Some people criticize me, including my wife, you know, my kids, Papa, stop with all these quotes, you know, you always talk about Paul Valéry. But to me, I quote things because they said it so well. I don't use it to show off, oh, I know Paul Valéry and you don't know. To me, are like examples. So in a way, they're tools to say things, you know. But many people misunderstand it because many people quote to show they know Dante Alighieri or William Shakespeare. It's the way you use the quote. I think Francesca is using collective knowledge or shapes already written, not to give prestige to herself and not to feel safe. Some people are afraid. So if I use something everybody knows, nobody can criticize me. What is called commonplaces, you know, when you use stereotype phrase. The last thing, there is a video by my favorite singer, it's called Nathalie Merchant. It's called Storytellers. You can, I could even put it on, but maybe not. It's, if you find it on YouTube, is a long version of a song which is called Life is Sweet. In this video, she not only sings the song Life is Sweet, but she tells how she composed the song. And I say, at a certain moment, she says, I composed this song and I used a very, let's say, abused phrase, life is sweet. You can find it on every motivational thing. To see if an artist using that can give new meaning. And then she quotes, what's her name? Jenny Holzer with a video say, by repeating commonplace phrases, she gives new meaning. Can you, to me, I would kiss in this moment Nathalie Merchant, because she had the courage to use the phrase life is sweet, which is the most abused phrase. You can find little hearts on internet and little cats like that. There's a record by Elio Lettorio Stese, which is called Gattini, little cats. You know, that's a joke, that's a satire, but I think that the great artist, especially when the angry young man, Bob Dylan of Nashville, you know, Bob Dylan made a record, it's called Nashville Skyline. He went to Nashville. There's a moment where angry young women and men, they have to confront themselves with the issue of tradition. They arrive there, they don't start from there. Stupid people start from tradition. Really sophisticated artists, they feel the need sooner or later to confront themselves with tradition, but not in the same way. It's the opposite path. It's the complete opposite path. They don't see any guarantee. It's exactly what Francesca said before. You know, there's no guarantee in tradition. It's just a way to connect individual experience that it makes sense. So you realize that just spitting out what you have is not enough to make sense. So if you do what is called expressionism, you know, the German movement, the risk of expressionism is what you could call hermetism. If you invent your own language every time, you can say what you want, but maybe the other people don't give a damn, or they get bored, or they misunderstand. So using other people's words, not as a guarantee, to me is what Francesca is doing. You know, is somehow she recognizes a collective language, she reinvents it every time, but not in a stupid way. You know, the technology of bamboo, everything is reinvented, the shape of a brick, but somehow in filigrana, in watermark, you say in English, in the back you have the collective memory. This is very important because it's a reinvention, being aware of collective civilization, which is also opposite to the young kid who thinks, okay, I arrive, I do it all, so easy to do it. You know, it's stupid. All the principiants are a little bit stupid. So did I communicate the reason why I think today was extremely important having Francesca Torzo with us? I mean, she was extremely generous. It's 2 o'clock. She has, you don't know how much in this moment Francesca Torzo, all the words was Francesca Torzo, because she's again
crazy.
You know, is crazy. You know, she's in a crazy moment. So the fact that she gave 3 hours of her time to our course, it's the most precious gifts of a holy saint. It's like Madre Teresa di Calcutta, you know, so we got her. No, but I'm joking. But I think, did you realize the depth of her mind and her work? I think whenever you're next to a great person, this great person forced us to rediscuss what we do. You know, it's amazing in a way. It really, I don't want to be too motivational, you know, because I think motivational talks are stupid, but it changes your standards. You come out and you realize all you did up to that moment was just the surface, was just fashion, was just superficial. So we went into the depth of a mind, and I swear, I think very few of us can get to that, because I'm invidioso. I'm jealous in a way of the mind of Francesca Torzo, because she gets to depth normal people cannot get. But she's also generous, you know, so she pursues her own way in an amazing way. The other day, I went to look back. A famous film is called The Fountainhead, in Italiano La Fonte Meravigliosa. It's a film you can find, it is black and white. It's about the architect Ayn Rand. She was an American writer, and she was labeled a little like being right-wing, but she was neither right nor left. She was against collectivism. Let's say she was a philosopher writer who said the great things are done by individuals who go against the rules. And this film is taken by her novel, and they take the architect as the hero. So if you go on YouTube, the Italians, and you type "Io sono l'architetto," is the final, I don't tell the whole story of the film, is the architects in a tribunal saying, you know, like, I defended my work against everybody. So for Ayn Rand, the architect is the example of somebody who fights for his thing, but also can be very frustrated because he cannot do things alone. Okay, so can we recognize individual work as the basics, which means you need to think with your own head, to stay at the table, to go deep? We need tranquility and we need depth. If you always so worried about communication, you will be so worried about telling things before you even understand them. In a day where all architects become showmen, Francesca Torzo, it's another thing. She goes in depth. I mean, it's totally different from many. This does not mean Bjarkingels is not interesting. I find interesting also in Bjarkingels. But can you understand the difference? One is all based on communication. Communication comes first. I have to please the other to convince them to do my building. Francesca Torzo managed to do the Z333. If she tells the story of her economics, the politics, this is amazing. It's totally amazing, because the condition where I still now do not understand, when I see the picture of her going there, how can you put that realization into the frame of a typical European public work? Because when you have to have the rules of bidding, of describing, you know, when you have to describe what you are doing to bid, to put a price on it, it's amazing. I don't know. This is still a mystery to me. It's like a hero achievement. But given that we are normal people, we are not Francesca Torzo, I think that we come out like with elevated thoughts. The effect on me is jealousy. It's an artistic jealousy. Once I wrote to a colleague, I saw your building is marvelous. I hope the jealousy that I have for you is not me punching the tires of your Vespa, but to make things better. In the old times, Borromini and Bernini, they were jealous one of each other, not because of the fame, it was artistic jealousy. So we should not be jealous of the fame of others. We should be jealous of the level they acquire of depth. So I'm jealous of Francesca Torzo, I seriously am, but it elevates my spirit. Now I feel a new man. So I come out of this event completely changed forever. So
I'm going to hide under the table. Completamente.
And I hope my students are, you know, I really think it sets another standards, and then you are obliged to realize the standard is there. Once somebody is capable to do it, everybody else have to acknowledge that this can be done because she did it. You know, it's there to see, so she did it. So from now on, we have to go 1 or 2 steps forward.
I'm curious to see then the works.
I mean, we don't dare to see, maybe. I mean, of course, sometimes we invite critics, but in this moment of Francesca, I don't dare to ask her to come back to see them. So I think she was already very generous to give us 3 hours. I think it was marvelous 3 hours. Maybe, let's say, if you go by Milano and by any chance you're around, maybe we could invite you for a quick review to the final days. But I think we're already very thankful of what you did today.
I am very thankful as well. I think it's a mutual gift today. Beautiful shared thoughts and discussions, and also the work of the students. So I am pretty speechless in this moment. Cino.
Ok, applauso, dai, facciamo, I don't know. Let's do conventional applause, whatever. Otherwise, we will never end. This moment, celebrations have to end. So I, as a priest, I can say, no, devi dire, andate, la messa è finita. There's a film by Nanni Moretti called The Mass is Finished. So the problem is between something which everybody knows exactly what to do in the moment, like the Mass, and some kind of spontaneous talk that can degenerate into nothing. So in this time, I played the priest.
Yes.
And I said, bless you all. You have the words of Francesca Torzo because somebody needs to direct that. And that's what rites are all about. The idea that Thanksgiving, you eat the chicken, and Christmas, you do the Christmas tree. So we need shared moments on our calendar where to begin and to end.
And buon appetito.
Buon appetito. Francesca, it was great. It was really, really, really grateful. I speak in the name of others.
Thank you.
Applauso, dai.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Brava.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. It was wonderful.